Let's Talk to Animals. My name is Shannon. I'm an animal intuitive and sensitive, an animal communicator, if you will, and Reiki master practitioner here at Animal Love Languages. And that's Pearl Cuts. Those of you who are listening to the podcast version, those of you who are watching know exactly who you're listening to. If you've landed here at Let's Talk to Animals for the very first time, welcome. Yes, we are all about demystifying, de-wooing, if you will, all things animal communication. And that means we are talking with animal intuitives, animal communicators, animal light workers from all walks of life, sharing their stories. How did you get started? How did you know that it was happening to you? How has your journey progressed? And how has it changed your life? What has this work brought into your consciousness that is transforming you? And so today on Let's Talk to Animals, we have Sammy Thompson all the way from Africa, yay, to share her rather unique journey into work with animals and humans and nature. Sammy Thompson, you can find her at Sammy Thompson, and that's SAMMY Thompson.com. I will put that in the show notes. So grateful to have you and to be able to learn more about your work. Welcome.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you for inviting me, and it's lovely to be here. I think you're doing a wonderful job and a wonderful work with sharing and having people share their stories. I think it's such a wonderful thing for so many who are just opening up to this or seeing different perspectives on it. So thank you.
Oh, absolutely. It's my pleasure. And so, what I always ask guests on the show to do, because we have a lot of folks here who are new, who are maybe questioning, wondering if it's happening with their own animals or with animals that come into their space. We also have a lot of folks who are just, they have a huge heart for animals and want to make a difference. And so I always each week, invite our guests to kind of rewind us, if you will, take us back where your journey started, how you started to realize that this was something that was happening in your life, and kind of how you took those first steps and you wanted to have more of these experiences.
Okay, well, it wasn't. I grew up on farms with animals around me, but grew up with the typical conditioning and societal programming that animals couldn't communicate or that animals were a different species. And so while I loved animals and always had animals around me, it was never a thing. I didn't think that they were lacking in intelligence. It was just the thought that there was a bridge we couldn't cross, that we couldn't communicate with each other. And about 14 years ago, the stable yard where I was riding organized an animal communication workshop, and I'd not heard of it before then. Up until then, I'd been a typical animal loving human. I gave my animals food, love, shelter, affection, exercise. What more could they want? And so that workshop kind of started cracking those control centers or biases in my brain open to hang on a mo, maybe there's more than what I've been aware of my whole life. But it wasn't an immediate switch to doing the workshop and now suddenly I can hear every animal. Because of course this wonderful piece of jello inside this black box that's called our mind we give it free rein in our lives, and mine was running all over the place going, oh no, you're making this up, and no, this can't be possible, and maybe you're not one of those that can do it, and people are going to laugh at you, and all of these little voices going on at the back of my mind going, oh no, maybe not. And so it took a long time of practice and of delving in there and of continually chipping away at that self-doubt and that confidence and the conditioning and the bias and the programming that is just so ever present in our society and with us. So over the years, just continued doing it, continued working with it, and then to where I am now. And along with that journey, it became a foundation, I think, for opening my perspective to so much more. It's through that, of course, with the Reiki energy coming along, I studied Reiki as well, along hand in hand with the animal communication. And along with that, I was also then guided to look into shamanic practices,
Mm.
and I did the received the Munai key rites, which are the 9 rites of initiation gifted by the Quero shamans in South America. And what's wonderful, I think, about that is those rites are planted as seeds in the energy vehicle, and it's what happens afterwards that germinates those seeds. And I think it is like Reiki, I think you would find as well. It's a gentle process, very subtle but very powerful, that it starts to, and with animals as well, they start to pull you in the right direction for you to step onto your path of purpose, if you allow them and if you can be open to them. But again, it's kind of where it all sticks and where it all gets started is the mind and the brain, which is fascinating to me. But it's how we can break that open. And so now I combine animal communication with shamanic practice, with vibrational healing, for both for humans, for animals, and for nature. I would think that, interestingly enough, we humans need animals in order to survive, and plants in order to survive. Animals really only need nature to survive, and nature doesn't need either humans or animals to survive. And I also think that is the kind of levels of intelligence, whereas we're actually at the bottom. And we need animals and nature. Nature is the biggest intelligence that we are needing to learn from and open up to. But that's just my personal thoughts. That's how it kind of opened up for me and started for me.
It's really funny that you say that because I think to myself, if, and I share this a lot on the show, but if we had a solar flare and the power grid got knocked out and there was no dinner and you put me and our dachshund in the backyard and tasked us with finding something to eat, I can tell you who would get fed and who would still be hungry. So, really, I love how you share breaking down those inner barriers and biases in the mind. It does feel like the mind can be our greatest stumbling block. And I have a feeling a lot of folks listening are really going to relate to what you shared about thinking, oh no, this can't possibly be happening for me. This isn't real. I'm making it up. And that I've seen that stop many, many people. It's still even, it stops me from time to time especially when I get information that my mind can't make sense of.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
I'd love for you to share a little bit more about kind of how you worked through these. So you mentioned you did a lot of practice, but because now you're working professionally, when somebody needs you, you're able to be present for them consistently and share. You've got a variety of different services that you offer. So what got you through that learning curve, and that kind of, how did you get your mind on board?
It took a long time, and it was, I think, animals that got me through it, because my animals, consistently kept showing me that it's real. And I think there were so many places where I put full stops or obstacles in my own way with my mind, thinking that, and what I've learned, what I would say now and what I teach now is very different to the way I learned it, because I think it's what I say now is that there was always for me, a sense that only a few people had this gift. And what I've learned since is that we are animals. Animals are trying to communicate with us all the time. We are the ones who have blocked it. And we all have that same animal sense still within us that allows us to hear other animals. But it's not a mental conversation that we're going to be having, it's a full body sense. It's a full body conversation. And it's about learning to feel with the body, listen with the heart, and get out of the mind. And so, thank, thankfully, the animals are so patient. I have so much respect and awe for the animal kingdom, for consistently wanting to work with us. We are we're thick sometimes. I'm sorry to say, but um, and when I
Very
started
true.
my own animals who took the time again and again to reassure me and to show me, I had a wonderful experience with my partner who was very typically animal communication doesn't work and you're making it up
Oh,
and it can't be real. And so I said to him, well, give me something to ask our animals to do, and then I'll ask them and maybe they'll do it. And this is at the beginning of my journey. And so we had various different cats and dogs at the time. And he asked that the one cat who was very afraid of thunderstorms, when the next storm was to happen, instead of hiding away, he was to go to my partner. And the other cat, he wanted her, who she'd been a feral kitten that we brought in, and she was always kind of very on her own, off to the side, didn't really want to interact with us much. And he said he wanted her to come and sit on the floor. She would usually be in the cupboard or in another room or somewhere on her own. And I asked each of them with that think of, they're never going to do this, and I'm going to be so embarrassed, and please, will you do this? And they did. And that floored me, but I didn't want to show my surprise too much. I was going, yes, of course it will work. But inside I was going, oh, they actually did that. And
wow.
so many of those times, and other animals that I've worked with. And for a lot, so what I teach now is the basis of understand that the mind is going to do this. Accept that the mind is going to throw that doubt out, but you have to believe and you have to know that the mind is playing tricks on us all the time. And so, what I try and teach my students is that reality is something, and perspective is something that we each have, which is different to somebody else's. And just to have that continually cracking that open of it's possible, it might be possible, it can be possible. There are so many animal communicators out there. There are so many people showing the way. There are so many people who are there, and nobody's not going to get it. Everyone can do it. It's absolutely possible. And if you have your own animals, you're already doing it. You just don't know. Because most people who start the journey think it's a mental thing, that we're going to have a mental conversation with an animal. And yes, there will be times, but it's about developing the full body senses and getting back into the body, because we're a traumatized species as humans. We live from here up and out of our body, dissociated and disconnected. And so when we start working with the body and coming back into our own body, animal communication and communication with nature kind of happens as a side effect, a natural side effect, once we become more aligned with ourselves. And so by focusing on this, suddenly everything else that we're trying to do, but at the moment we're almost trying to focus on a symptom of animal communication and go, I want to do that without doing the work here. And we need to start by doing the work on the body and getting back into the body, getting out of the mind, learning all of those things. And there's so many wonderful ways to do that, where as a side effect or a consequence, then animal communication, suddenly all the animals are willing to talk to us. And I think that's another big thing, especially with wild animals, is we're such a toxic, we have this, we're in our minds, we have this monkey mind, and we have this emotional stuff that we carry with us all the time. And so for wild animals, they're kind of like, oh, I'm not sure I want to go there. We can connect. But the more again that we can come into coherence and harmony with ourselves, the more we can come into harmony with nature, and nature responds then.
Did you feel like the journey that you took and the shamanic rites that you experienced, did you feel that that helped you? What were some of the things that you did to really help you get in your body? You know, a lot of people when they start, it's like I first realized that I could talk to animals when I got a download in meditation and I heard you are an animal intuitive and sensitive. And I mean, I love animals, but I didn't know what that meant. And I've been meditating since I was 19. And I also come from a background where in a former career, I struggled with an eating disorder for 20 years. I founded a charity. We provided mentoring for people with eating disorders. Let's just say I wasn't very home in my body. And I've found certain things that I can do now. But the biggest stumbling block, again, it was mental. It was like I didn't know I wasn't home. Like I literally didn't know I wasn't in my body. I was just so conditioned to head up into my head that. So, what would you offer in terms of some guidance to somebody who's like, I've never even thought about that before. How do you know? Or what could you do? What were some of the things you did that helped you get into your body and really make a home there?
Well, there are a couple of avenues or areas to work on. One of them being working with the mind. And I think learning to focus the mind. Imagination is a wonderful tool. Now, imagination has gotten a
Mm,
bad rap as an adult. We're
I
told
know.
it's okay to prepare for the worst. So we can imagine negatively, prepare for the worst, and you won't be disappointed. But when you want to imagine positively, you're like, oh no, that's arty farty and it's for the creatives and it's not real and you can't use it. But yet the placebo effect does exist, and imagination is an incredibly powerful tool that we use every day, but we use it negatively. We worry, we fear, we think of the
Mm,
future, we're imagining, and we base our decisions based on our imagination. Now we need to learn to focus our mind in a positive direction and imagine the best, imagine the better. Because by using imagination to open up to animals, it's the first step in getting this brain to open up and accept it. Because once the brain goes, oh, you've done this before, each time you do it, it gets a little bit better. And so you use the imagination and it's a wonderful tool to use with animals, by the way, in rehabilitation, is to use their imagination because they have the same neural networks that we have. The second area is to work on getting into the heart and addressing trauma. I think trauma in both humans and animals is not being addressed enough or is only starting to be addressed. Early life trauma, and we are all traumatized at some level. There are many things that we experience in early life that we are not capable of dealing with at the time. And so when an experience is had that brings up an overwhelming flood of emotions that cannot be safely expressed, they become internalized and lodged in the body. And that then comes out, it's held in the subconscious, and that then comes out later as anxiety, unhealthy coping habits, hiding away, whatever it is, you can probably trace it back to some sort of early life trauma. And so there are wonderful programs out there that deal with early life trauma. One of them is The Emotion Code by Bradley
mm,
Nelson. Fantastic to work with the self, but as well as with your animals and as well as with your family, because not only are you dealing with your own, remember that our animals are also coping and dealing with our emotional stuff through them, because I say that
very true.
our animals are the biggest empaths out there. And so by getting back into the body is by addressing those underlying ones that we might not be aware of, that's keeping our bodies, our subconscious said, you can't cope, I'm going to take you out of your body. But that became a coping skill. And so it became so used to being out the body. Now we have to address those underlying things. Another area to work on is getting into the heart. And a program there that's fantastic is the Heart Math Institute. And to
Mm,
look at the Heart Math Institute and how to work with that again, because that brings you into alignment with nature. And one thing that the shamanic practice has taught me is that we need to come into alignment with nature, with
mm,
pristine nature. That's the other areas that we need to find and we need to preserve the wild nature, not the manicured nature, not the manicured parks, not because what that has happened is that we humans have come along and we have traumatized a space in nature to resemble our own trauma. We need to find the wild nature because wild, pristine nature has got a frequency to it that when we can be in meditation in that space, we come into coherence with it. We come into harmony with that space. And when it is untouched and it's been preserved like that, it has an entrainment effect on us. That is so powerful because using the heart math techniques, that can be used when you are walking around in our daily lives, which is filled with electromagnetic frequencies, which is bombardment of discordant sounds and all sorts of things that are affecting us on all levels. And by learning to come into, I think what's most important is by learning what peace feels like. Because we humans, we have a mind idea of peace being the absence of war. That's our concept of peace, but we've forgotten what peace actually feels like within ourselves. And it's really difficult to find that in our busy lives. And so, as an exercise, I always recommend going into pristine nature and spending some time there until you can find out what peace feels like. And then bringing that back into your daily life and learning how to generate that when you are with animals or when you are in your own life, because it has that effect, like being with therapy horses. That's what they're doing. Is they're bringing peace. They're bringing a sense of peace to the space. And by learning to be less human and more horse and more animal in our heart space, we can learn to come back to that. And all that helps when it comes to communicating with animals. There's no one particular way or steps to communicating with animals in my experience. So it's about taking whatever steps feel most comfortable for you and using them, but using them from a space of heart-centered coherence, using them from a space of being able to be in your body and being able to feel the vibrations and resonance and frequencies in your body. And by using meditation or meditative practice to quieten the mind. I think it's impossible to quieten the mind completely. I think you have to be in Tibet in a cave for 20 years with a village feeding you, then you might get a quiet mind. But I think we can learn how to quieten our reaction to our mind's thoughts and be less affected by them or less reactive to them. And I think by using those three areas or tools, we can enhance the practice of connecting with animals. And learning how to connect with a tree is actually a wonderful example or way of learning how to get into the energy of connecting with animals. Because by quietening yourself and getting into the space of being with a tree without having to listen to a conversation, you start to open up to the feeling of what sharing an emotion or sharing a space feels like. And that's sometimes all that happens with animals. And then the intuition is the flavor on the edge of that starts to spark up, because intuition is very quiet and our minds are so very loud. And intuition is the thing on the edge of that'll start to come up, and you'll suddenly go, oh, hang on a moment, I got something there. What is that? Let me delve into that a little bit more. Or that little thing starts to peel as an onion, and suddenly you're getting more and more and more of that coming out. I think it's about also developing our ability to hear our intuition, and by knowing what our body wants, helps us get there.
It's so beautiful. I'm thinking right now of my mother and I were in the car last week driving, and she was playing something on the radio. You know, the music, we were actually wanting to turn it up, but then the commercial break came on and it was so freaking loud, and we were like blown back in our seats, you know. And it's often that way when we're watching TV too. If we still, you know, every so, or even on YouTube, it's like a commercial comes on and it's like, whoa. And that to me feels like an analogy between the mind and intuition. It's like, if you feel like you're listening to a commercial break, it's probably your mind talking. If you feel like you're listening to something where you would like to find the volume dial and turn it up and it's intriguing and you're like, oh, I want to hear more. What is that? That might be your intuition talking. I loved your analogy of a tree, because I mean, it may not be the kind of pristine nature, because not everybody has the easy access to it, especially right now with COVID kind of like pushing us face to face with ourselves until we realize maybe we do sound like a commercial break in our head like all the time. And what do we do with that? It's like, go find a tree. Like you can find one tree, or go find your animal. I mean, I was sitting here kind of just petting Pearl's neck feathers. He's a little nasty right now, so he's a little grumpy, and I'm listening to you, and I'm just like, the combination of listening to your voice and listening to my favorite topic in the world, which is talking about animals and nature, and just adding soft neck feathers, put me into this state of total bliss. And so it's like we can have these micro moments where, like, I loved your analogy of the cave, like 24/7 for 20 years straight. We're either going to be peaceful or we're going to be like insane or we're going to be dead. But so let's try to string some micro moments together and slowly but surely realize that, okay, being in my body is kind of amazing. I love what Einstein said. He said, there's nothing's a miracle or everything's a miracle. And that's what I thought of when you were talking about dealing with the doubts and finding even creative ways to invite your partner to just play with the idea. Maybe it's possible. It's like you can invite your mind to play with the idea. Maybe it's possible. I wonder, get curious, like maybe everything really is a miracle. Maybe it is, and maybe that means this is real too. And if so, like I'm kind of speaking to our listeners and our viewers right now too. Like if you're still hanging with us, if you're still listening, chances are good you've already had a little taste of that miracle. And that's exactly why we're here, because your left brain that likes to logic everything out, make plans and strategize and make sure that everything makes sense and that you're adulting well enough is going to say, oh, but here's two animal communicators right here, and there's so many more out there, and the market's glutted. And it's like, guys, really, and gals, think of all the animals that have never had a chance to share even a little fragment of who they are with a human animal. Why would they want that? Because they know that we have the power to save this planet and to reestablish a safe home for all of us. So if you're interested, if you're pondering, give yourself a chance. There's an animal in your life who's asking you to give us a chance. And that's why we're doing this. Because even if every human opened their ears wide, we would all have a full-time job. We'd all have lines of animals just wanting to share a little bit of their wisdom, a little bit of their insight, their fresh creative ideas. I love what you said about pristine nature, because we do feel creative when we give ourselves this space. It's like, when was the last time you created anything that wasn't on a to-do list? Nature creates stuff that's not on a to-do list all the time, and it's just wonderful. Nobody wants to go to the accountant. No offense to accountants, I love mine, but we don't want to go there on vacation. We want to go see the wild beauty in Africa or Costa Rica or in our backyard. Even if we're having a staycation, we want to and that's what nature helps us do. Just breathing can really help you get back in your body. I know it really helps me. So we're kind of cropping up here on the end of our time today, which always flies by oh so much too fast. But you've got a lot of you with animals and humans in a lot of different ways, and there are so many different ways to work with animals. I love that you're living what you're sharing. You have offerings where people can even Zoom with you and take a virtual nature walk and reconnect. I would love it if you would share a little bit about some of the ways you might be able to help people who want to get back in their body, who want to feel more connected, who maybe are listening to this and they can't travel. It's not feasible right now for whatever reason. Would you kind of get started with somebody?
Well, I think I do a lot of tailor-made one-on-one either mentoring or courses or along whatever variety. And of course, with that, it's purely based on what the person or group, where they are, what they're searching for, what they need. Been very blessed to be guided to live in a beautiful part of the world. And we have the whales, we have the forest, we have caves where archaeological digs have found evidence of human habitation dating back 70,000 years. We have rock art. And so some of the things that I do to help humans who can travel is I do bespoke retreats, one-on-one or a day, several days. I also do workshops and courses and mentoring and coaching on Zoom or in person. And that includes things like working with vibrational tree mists, beautiful forest nearby, pristine forest, and the forest steward made a range of tree mists based on the trees in the forest and bringing their energy through these vibrational mists. Absolutely beautiful. Platypus forest tree mist. Um, Working with people with those mists, teaching them how to connect with trees, teaching them how to connect with animals, either their own or with animals, as well as teaching them how to connect with nature and how to connect with themselves, teaching them through giving them, equipping them with the skills to connect with animals, connect with nature, connect with themselves through Reiki, through vibrational healing, how to, for instance, use muscle testing, how to ask the body what it wants and what it needs. So just the basics of just kind of connecting with humans to bring humans back into connection with nature. I dream of a day, and I'm sorry to say, but I dream of a day when animal communicators are no longer needed as something different. I dream of a day when everybody is there, in harmony and in balance, back in balance with, because we were there once. It might have been tens of thousands of years ago, but we were there once. And I think we carry that in our DNA, and we can get back to that. But it's just about learning how to undo the worst of what modern day has brought us and bring the best of what all of those ancient traditions, and what we still have within us, bring ourselves back to that. I also work with animals around the world, doing a lot of trauma release with them. I work with big cats, doing rescue and relocation of big cats, lions, tigers, cheetahs, leopards who have been rescued from zoos and places where they've not been looked after and then brought to sanctuary in South Africa. I must say there the difference that it makes to the big cats to be able to be prepared for their journey and relocation is incredible. And that, as well as being I think a huge thing for me as well is to see the effect on animals, because I think as animal communicators, we might not often see the major impact that it has on the animals around the world. So as animal communicator, I would also recommend, if you can, get involved with a haven, with some place that you can work with, where you can give a little bit back of what you have in order to help the animals. Because over the years I also work with an animal haven where we've worked rehabilitating dogs, donkeys, and horses. And then we've retirement for the horses and donkeys, but we've worked with the dogs to find them homes. The difference has been incredible for them. And it just makes such a difference, because we're doing it for the animals. We're doing it to make the world a better place for them, because we're the species that has messed it up. We're the species that is unfortunately the one at fault here, and we need to kind of do what we can to make it better for the animals around us, because we're the ones who've taken them away. We've taken away where they can live in the wild. We've changed them through breeding over the centuries to not be able to survive on their own. We need to take responsibility for that. And so do a little bit, do what you can to give back, and do the same for nature. If you can, create a wild part of your garden. If you can, try and um, find and support the local reforestation projects, or the local the places that need the help to remain pristine. Make a change with the pollution. Support the ocean conservation. Do things like that do make a difference. You can make a difference. Everybody can. And I think that the world needs us more than ever to step forward with what we can do. Another thing I want to say as well is that never think you can't do this. You can. If you're starting off on your journey, um, just give yourself the space to have the doubt. Give yourself permission to feel the doubt, and then go, it's okay, but I'm going to do it anyway. I might feel that I'm not getting it right, but I'm going to do it anyway. Just a quick example, I was running a workshop, and one of the cats that we were working with in the workshop, as a test question for the workshop participants, the question was, where do you like to sleep? And her answer was, in an upside down hat on the roof of a barn. And when we asked her human, she said, "Well, we live in an apartment." And it was the funniest thing because one of the things I always say in the workshops is that whatever you're getting, know that you are getting it. It might just not make sense at the moment. And so as we unpacked this fantastic little thing, the human, it eventually came out that when they went on holiday, the cat would go and stay with the mom, and the mom lived in a 2-story house. And the cat would sleep in the top bedroom in a hat box on the bed. And so you could then put those two and two together and find the thing. And I use that as an example to say, whatever you get, no matter how weird it might seem, remember that you might only be getting one little perspective of something. You might only be getting a color or a picture of a flower, but the flower could be a flower pot or a garden or a color on a blanket. Never ever think that you're not getting something or you got it wrong. Always, always know that when you got something, and it comes through your imagination, because your brain might not let it through to begin with, but if you're going, but I'm imagining it, and maybe I made it up. Yes, you made it up, because it's the only way you're going to get through to your brain to begin with. And as you get going with that, you'll suddenly start to tell the difference between make up imagination and intuition imagination. But practice and keep going with it and don't give up. We need animal communicators. We need so many. And we need to
We
keep
do.
growing with.
We do. And I absolutely love your analogies because animals are tasked with trying to convey and communicate information with us in a context that is foreign to them but familiar to us. And
Yes,
it gives us such a wonderful chance to see what seems so normal to us from this crazy new perspective, this crazy new pair of funhouse glasses that to us it's an upstairs bedroom with a hat box. To our cat it's a barn with a with a roof and a hat box on top of. I mean, it's like, it's how do they see our world? It I
yes.
feel like it lightens us up in
It
some
does. I remember,
profound way. We're like, yeah, I guess I could see that, and it just makes us, this is just not so serious, it's just asking us to try on a new perspective for
yes,
size.
I
How could
remember,
that, I love that. How could that be right? And just ask yourself, how could it be right? How, instead of oh, that must not be right. Wait a minute, this animal is genuinely going out of their way to try to communicate with us. How can I work with this so I understand? It's almost like we've got a translation book, but it's very rudimentary. And so we're going to have to eventually, if you're in a country where you don't really speak the language, if you really got to go to the bathroom, you're going to be able, hopefully, at some point to figure out how to communicate that and find the toilet or the baños or whatever it is you're looking for, What is such a great
absolutely.
analogy.
Yes.
I adore that.
I, I once had to explain the concept of golf to a horse. The horse was,
Hmm.
but why?
Right.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Exactly. So it's about really waking up, and just being feeling re-inspired, because
Yes,
sometimes, especially when we get to that adult phase of life, it doesn't feel that inspiring. We wake up, okay, I'm up again, I'm doing the thing again, and I'm going to do the next thing again, I'm going to do the next thing again, and reawakening to the fact that not everything that I mean, we're not an invasive species. We behave like one. There's a
yes,
big difference. I remember when not my first experience of talking to animals, but the first one that was validated for me that yes, that was an experience of talking to an animal. And I was like, okay, I'm doing it, I'm doing the thing. And I remember feeling like I was a spaceship and a whole bunch of bells and whistles had just turned on inside me that I never knew were there. And it makes me feel like, gosh, if everybody could have that experience, because we don't have a manual for all of this body, this mind, we don't know how everything's connected. And what if you have superpowers inside of you that you never even knew were there? Animal communication woke me up to what it means to be alive and what it feels like to be alive in a way I never knew was possible. And there's lots and lots of ways to experience animal communication right out in nature. But you can start from wherever you are. And that's the point of Let's Talk to Animals. We bring you a new guest, an animal communicator, an energy worker, a light worker in the field, pet care practitioners, holistic aromatherapist, pet wellness. How do we begin to reconnect from the heart and remember at a heart level, what you said, emotionally, in the heart, in the body, that we do belong here. Let's make this a real homey place again for all of us to live, and recognize that if you're still here, you're already making a difference. You're opening your mind, you're interested, you're wondering, you're playing with some fresh, new, adventurous ideas that only a microcosm of our species is even aware is really out there, let alone interested in. You're being brave. I want to say thank you. If you enjoyed Let's Talk to Animals, a young show, we're still pretty new. We're coming up on our 50th episode. So we've got some wonderful resources to share with you. It's always free on YouTube and anywhere that streaming things stream. You can find us. And if you can't, pop me a line and I'll see what I can do to change that. And if you'd like to hear from someone specific, please let me know, and I'll do my best to bring them on the show. You can find us at animallovelanguages.com/podcast, on YouTube and Spotify, etc. You can find our guest today, Sammy Thompson from Africa, at sammythompson.com. And of course, you can find myself and Mr. Pearl and our wonderful little menagerie nesting and biting away at animallovelanguages.com. Sammy, thank you again so much for donating your time to be a part today and share more about your world and what you do and your love for nature and the planet.
Thank you,
Very
Shannon.
inspiring.
Bless you. Thank you. Bless you for everything
Very
that you're
grateful. Very, very grateful.
doing.
And
Bye,
to
Pearl.
you. Please like, subscribe, share, all of our love. Okay.